load. So let's just check in and kind of see how people are doing. I want to have us do kind of a check-in tonight and do a checkout. I'm just going to start trying to do this at the beginning and end of class, and the check-ins are going to be typically something related to the class, and the checkouts are going to be kind of how you feeling about the class overall. Okay, so just kind of give you a heads up that we may start doing that. Okay, so one thing that you have thought about related to conflict this week, it might be what you wrote in the discussion post, but it might not be that at all. So I'm going to start just so you can illustrate, because I don't do the discussion post in the same way you guys do. So I had an incident this week that I made a decision that I didn't include somebody on that I thought was a really small decision, and they got pretty upset. Um, and so I was preparing for the class for this coming week and was thinking about, are they upset about the decision I actually made, or are they upset about being left out of the process? And what they thought about in terms of what they thought that was saying about my relationship with them. And so that'll relate directly to something that we talk about this this coming tonight, actually. So that's something that I thought about. So who would like to go next? Something that you've thought about related to conflict this week. Yeah, Tony.
Well, during, doing all the reading and whatnot, I always find the conflict and the communications between us or individuals within Asian cultures that is typically, a face-saving operation and not trying to prove them wrong and things like that. Hopefully, once I get through all of this, I can step towards working internationally. And I always find that very interesting because face saving, if it's something that you've never done or you're not used to it and you're not used to seeing it, is a very complex operation that can cause a lot of conflict and it can shut doors before they even really have a chance to open. And approaching those and knowing a prescribed ritual or being willing to do a prescribed ritual and show that humility to help resolve that conflict so you can move on is something that I'm enjoying reading and looking into.
Also thinking about it, but also thinking about the connection to future career opportunities for yourself. So, okay. Well, thank
Absolutely.
you for sharing that, Tony. Somebody else. And Jeff, you just came in. I thought I'm going to start each week with trying to do a check-in related to something you've thought about related to the class, and also a check-out at the end about kind of how class is going for you. If there's anything you need to let me know, that could be made better. So, who would like to go next? Something you thought about related to conflict?
I guess I can go. I had, several incidents of conflict this week. But the first one was I was teaching and kind of in a rhythm in my classroom, and another teacher opened my door and reprimanded a student in front of me without acknowledging me, and then left. And I used that conflict to try to build community, to galvanize support with the students. I did let the principals know that that is unacceptable. I was so caught off guard that I didn't know how to respond, but I didn't. But at the same time, I also wanted to be an advocate for my students, and um, yeah, I was beyond hot, beyond myself. I was not, but the students saw that, and they saw that, and I think that they recognized that I had a level of care. And it was strange because then it's a rowdy class. Everybody got quiet after that. But I've been, as a high school teacher, I'm always trying to build community. I'm always trying to build relationships and show, conflict today. Young man just walked out the class because I want him to sit in another seat. So can't the police service had to bring him back, and then that kind of thing. The second thing that I thought about conflict was, in my last video I said I'm gonna just, I'm having this back and forth with this community person. This person would just not stop. I've heard the phrase, if you give a mouse a cookie, they ask you for a glass of milk. She just will not stop, and I had resolved, I'm gonna do my next board meeting. I'm gonna apologize to her publicly. Before I could do that, she sent an email saying that I embarrassed her and that kind of stuff. Everything I was gonna talk about, and with some more toxic stuff. And I just said, okay, now I'm not going to do that. And for my peace, I'm just going to block her, and I don't want to get any more emails from her. And so that's where I am. So those are the couple stories where I am in terms of conflict. Is when I looked at the quilt making and I looked at just those metaphors, they're helpful. But I just think in this situation, we've gone. This will be 3 years that we've been fighting, and so I don't want to fight anymore. So I just choose not to dialogue, choose not to engage.
Yeah, okay, yeah, so there's choices we sometimes have to make, so. All right, thank you, Dr. Rice. Kat or Jeff, something that you've thought about related to conflict?
So this is past conflict, but when I was reading chapter 3, and it was I think we were talking about what is it? We were going over the trip model and different concepts. I keep going, and even the stuff on power. I keep going back to the conflict I had at my previous job when I lived in Texas. There was an individual that worked in a different part of the unit that I was a civilian working with, and he always got into conflict with everybody. And I don't know what the reason for was, but as I was reading through like power imbalances, like people with low power and how they perceive things, or don't judge, people's attributes by the way they act. It could be a situation and how past history. Um, as I was reading through all this information, I was just like ding 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 ding. Like that was just I was walking through my brain like the example of, but um I that situation never got resolved because as we were reading in the reading material, if a person who has past history doesn't looks at everything as a power imbalance, they're not gonna ever there's always gonna be conflict. So this individual, I just I just cut him off. Um Even before I left that job, that individual took a military mobilization, and I just cut off all contact. Actually, I got to the point where I got frustrated and I told the person straight to their face, listen, I've tried everything. We've gone through everything. That's it. I'm done with you. I'm like, don't contact me. Don't ask me any questions. I am not your supervisor. You need to go ask who your supervisor is because I know you're smart enough to do the work or do this and that. And that's it. But it was just all those, as we're reading, all those examples popped up into my head. And I kept thinking to myself, wow, I wish I had this book when I was going through that.
Yeah, we don't always, we're always on a growth pattern though. We're always thinking about, what can we do differently? But, in both the situations that you and Dr. Rice brought up, I mean, there are times in which more communication is not going to necessarily make it better. And so we have to, think about those kind of things. All right, Jeff, something besides the fact that you're sitting with a wonderful background that looks like you're by the ocean, what's going on in terms of conflict that you've thought about?
Yeah, and it was really intense, right, with all the readings, with all the information that was thrown at us. And like Kat was saying earlier with the trip model, that was, there's a lot of information in there, but like the relational goals and the identity and just that thought process of um sometimes things are thrown at the other person, but it's projecting their own thoughts, their own beliefs about themselves, in that sense. Um, which kind of made me, think about like more focusing on what they have to say. And then for the possible book, for the balcony, when we were talking about that in that book, I always thought about it for the broad perspective of stepping back, taking the action, which he kind of talks about with the pause, right? But that zoom in part, not just like in the details of that outside perspective of looking at the conversation like an out of body experience, but also just reassessing yourself. What is it that I'm actually wanting? Is it I, am in this conflict about getting PTO, because I need the PTO, or is it because I just need to have more flexibility in my schedule, or I need more time, maybe there's more work piled on during a lunch break instead of not having a true lunch break, or something like that. Um, so just reassessing yourself and making sure you're not projecting yourself onto the other person whenever you're in that conflict.
We're really being mindful of multiple things that could be going on in the conflict setting.
Mhm.
So, yeah. Well, these are all good kinds of things. I hope that people, as they're listening online, will also kind of think about what would I have answered to that question in terms of, what have I been thinking about conflict lately? Well, let me kind of give you just some feedback on the discussion boards, and then I'm going to go into what the assignments are for this week. See if you've got questions about those, and then we'll move directly into going into in some detail chapters 3 and 4 in the interpersonal conflict book. And it's nice that several of you actually referenced that the TRIP model. We're going to talk about that, and then the power imbalances, and that Kat was mentioning too. And we're going to talk about that as well. So as I was watching your videos and just kind of looking through, I loved the different metaphors that people were using. So kind of the metaphors, and I'll just go through some of these that I wrote down. So a tug of war, a mess, a battlefield. And then these were kind of like the metaphors before you kind of changed your perspective. Chess game, a referee, a blow up, a firestorm, killing, a tsunami or a tornado, a war. Okay, so some pretty kind of negative kind of things that were metaphors, and then just listing the kind of ways that you were reframe it. So we had puzzle, we had balancing act, we had a patchwork or quilt making, we had a dance. We had several people dance, a hill to climb or a problem to solve. We had building bridges. We had a growth opportunity, a garden. So a lot of potential there for kind of reframing. And I think, when I think about those reframes, they remind me of the balcony at some level. It's like that just gives me a different perspective of what else could be going on, either for that person, or how could I look at that situation so that it is not it's not so negative. Right now, my daughter just totaled her car last week. She wasn't hurt or anything, but nobody was hurt. She ran over a tractor trailer wheel that was in the middle of her lane in the middle of the night when she works a night job, and didn't see it. And anyway, so she's negotiating right now with the car. I mean, with getting a new car, and some of the things. If you guys have bought a new car recently, they oversold her warranties. So her end up amount that she was going to borrow ended up being like $5,000 more than she and I had talked about. And I'm like, why did you have to borrow that? Well, anyway, so she right now has this, it's a tug of war, with this. And sometimes the battlefield, sometimes those metaphors that are more negative are actually helpful, right? Because she is in battle. I mean, she feels like she's in battle right now with the person who won't call her back. And because I co-signed or I was on the deal, I said, hey, honey, if he doesn't call you back, I'm not signing this paperwork. You put a down payment, so you've got the car, but they got to make it right in order for you to be able to move forward. So anyway, she's working on that, and I think about that's conflict, right? When we're trying to just negotiate and trying to get what we want. So, but sometimes we don't want to go to, oh, I'm going to make a quilt with this person. It's like, why? That is not helpful here. So not all the time do we need to necessarily reframe in those kind of settings to do that. So this coming week, I'm going to give you 3 different options for your discussion post. And so I'm just going to share my screen. This helps the people online to be able to kind of see where things are as well. If it will share. Yeah, there we go. So under the assignments, just as a reminder, and by the way, for the online students, I decided for the weekly journal post, and this is only for the people who don't attend class. So if you ever don't attend class, you would do this as well, for the people who are here. But I decided to go ahead and put due dates by these. So, and I've only got the first 4 up, but so that you know kind of when they're due. I thought that was helpful because some of the folks didn't know when they're due because there's no points associated with it. It doesn't show up in the calendar as something that's due, but I went ahead and put those in. So don't forget to do those if the people are online. So the weekly discussion post, so we've got discussion week 3 here. So application from chapter 3 or 4. And so let me just open it up so you can see what it is that I want you to do. So as per usual, the use of AI is not allowed. I do allow you to use AI in some assignments like you did for the work-based plan. And by the way, those work-based plans were really good. The identification of the things that you all want to do and spend time on that you're going to actually start working on, not this week, not for this next week, but for the following week, you're going to start on your very first one. So we'll get into that next week as to what you need to do. But so in this post, you can do several options. You can either do application 4.4 from the 11th edition of the Interpersonal Conflict book or 4.3 from the 10th edition. So just make sure that if you choose one of these, that you do actually read the prompt. There were a couple of people that didn't quite do the prompt in the way that it said to do. They didn't focus on metaphors. And so I was like, wasn't sure where the confusion was on that. But let me just go over what this one says. So I am, so 4.10. So I'm in the 11th edition. In my office, I've got the other edition in case people ask me questions. But so this is 4.4. And I skipped ahead. So this is page 129 in the 11th edition. Think of a particular relationship in your lived experience where you are in conflict, strain, or you have the potential for struggle. Then list your own sources of power, and we'll go over that, the RICE acronym tonight. List your own sources of power using the RICE acronym. After that, go to a friend or partner and share the RICE examples from the book and ask them to list sources of power that you have. You're trying to basically see if you've missed any, okay, without showing the person your list. And then finally compare the 2 lists and see what sources of power you missed, okay? So you're going to, again, create the 3 to 5 minute video for this. So that's the first option, okay? The second option here is to apply the TRIP model, which we'll also talk about tonight from the chapter 3. This one is not an actual application box, so you'll have to just do what I've stated here, which is you take one of your current or past conflicts and in the video address the following. Briefly describe the conflict situation. Secondly, identify at least one goal from each of the TRIP categories and explain how it showed up in the conflict. And thirdly, reflect on which of the 4 goals seemed most important to you or to the other person and how that shaped the conflict's direction. Okay, so I don't care which one of those you do, but I want you to do one of them, okay? So same thing, this is due your initial post on Sunday night, 11:59 p.m. And then your response is due on the Wednesday before class, so 11:59 p.m. for that with the three classmates. So are there any questions, first of all, on that discussion post? I'm not seeing any questions. And just so you can look ahead in case you want to know how you're going to be applying the workplace conflict, this is not due this week, but let me just kind of show you that discussion 4, week 4, and you're going to see that discussion 4, week 6, week 8, week 10, and week 12. Those 5 entries are going to all be a discussion post. So starting next week, every other week is going to be related to this. So I'm just going to go over that real quick just so that you can kind of visually see what you've got to be thinking about for that. It's not due until September 14th, your first post on that, but let's just go through that. So the initial prompt is to identify in 2 to 3 sentences what feedback you'd like from your classmates on your first work-based plan entry. Okay, so I'll show you where that can be found. Okay, but you're going to put a shareable Google Doc link that's view only of your first work-based plan entry. Okay, which will be due also on Sunday night, the 14th. All right, so this is the first time that you don't have to have a video, that this is all in writing. So the first 3 weeks we've had to have videos, right? Just so you kind of get to know each other a little bit, and faces and voices. So at this point, let's go to that first work-based plan entry here, but you're going to tell your classmates, you're going to post the link, and then you're going to tell them what feedback would you like to have? What do you want? What do you want help with? What would you like to help have you problem solve? And that's what you're going to put in that prompt. And then the responses back are going to be your thoughts as a conflict expert, or getting to be a conflict expert, on what you think about their work-based plan based on the feedback that they're wanting. Okay, so let me just kind of overview that assignment as well, even though it's not due. So that is going to be basically what you're going to have to do for each one of these. So every other week starting next week. So the work-based conflict learning plan, if I click on this and get it to move. So entry 1, you can see that there's 5 of them, and they're due every other week. And again, these are the ones that you're going to be putting in that discussion board, not for this weekend, but for the following weekend. So entry number 1, you'll have to, in this case, click on view instructions to see it. Okay, so you're going to select one of the 5 work-based conflict plan tasks that you identified, and it doesn't have to be the very first one. Okay, what I would do is I would look through, because you're going to need to look for the chapters, the concepts that you're reading for week 4, or for, I guess it's week 5. Look at the chapters that are assigned for that week and pick the one that the chapters best relate to. Okay, and you'll just eventually, narrow it down where you only have one left at the very last. So what part of this task creates conflict? What concepts that you've read about in the last 2 weeks? And so I am giving you a little bit of freedom to kind of look back over the readings for the last 2 weeks, could help you deal with it, and how do you think they might help, and then cite those sources. What's one thing you'd like to implement in the future based on those concepts, and then put your implementation plan into a SMART goal format, filling in the blanks here. So in this case, since this one is due on 9/14, you would actually go back to the syllabus and look at the chapters, all the weekly materials, the readings before in the 2 weeks that are prior to that. So if we're going to say this is due, the first work-based plan entry is due by September 14th. So it would be basically what we're covering tonight and what we're covering next week. Okay, so that's basically what you'll do. And then when you get to this next one, the second work-based plan entry, it would be week 5's readings and week 6 readings. Okay, does that make sense? So that's something you can be thinking about. You could even, if you wanted to, start even kind of moving those, picking out which order you want to do things in, if you like to think ahead and look ahead to the chapter titles and topics. So that's the discussion post. So before I can go into another assignment that I need for you to start thinking about, what questions do you have about either that initial entry number 1 in the work-based plan, which is not due until the 14th, or the discussion post that's connected to that, or the one that's due this week?
One question I have is about the link from the Google Doc to that.
Yeah, so You know, when I go into a Google Doc, and sometimes I forget it, there was one, I think actually for this class that, I don't know if it was Kat, somebody actually said, I don't have it yet. I mean, they asked for ability to see it. When I go into a Google Doc, I push the share button, okay? So anytime you've got a Google Doc, the share button tells you who can see it. Now I hover over this right now and it says public on the web, anyone on the internet with the link can open. But there are other Google Docs that I have in my folder, and I'll just pull up, you know, kind of where I keep stuff. But so let's just take this one as one that I actually just did recently for a class. But if you look here under the share, it doesn't say that, okay? Shared with one person, which may mean that it's shared with, it's not shared with everybody. So if I was going to share this with everybody, I'd have to go over the share button. And oh, yeah, see, Dr. Driscoll has it because I was teaching a guest lecture in his class. And you notice here that this says restricted. So this general access has got to be changed to anyone with the link. So if I click this to anyone with the link, and I make sure they're just a viewer, I don't want them to change anything in it, okay? And then you click done. Now when I hover over this, it says public on the web, anyone on the link on the internet with the link can open. Okay, I don't necessarily want that to be true though, so I'm going to put it back to restricted, okay, and just have done. So that's what I mean over here when I'm saying under this weekly discussion post week 4 that I say put a shareable Google Doc link view only. Okay, that way everybody can see it and just view it, because you want your classmates to be able to see it. Are there other questions that you have? All right, there's one other assignment that I want you to start working on, and it's not due until September 21st if you see the syllabus. And so you may say, well, why is she asking me to start working on it? Well, it's because it requires a little bit more prep work, and it's this stakeholder map. We're getting ready to move into, if you kind of look here, the first 2 weeks were conflict perspectives and patterns. We're analyzing conflict. We're getting ready to move into context and complexities in a couple of weeks. And the context that's kind of threaded through the whole the semester, the end project that you're going to be working on is homelessness in Central Arkansas, okay? And specifically looking at Providence Park. And so I've built in for next week some additional kind of Providence Park things that I would like for you to start being familiar with. And so Providence Park is a tiny home village that's being built in Central Arkansas. And it is, they have a goal of being able to house, I think initially like 100 tiny homes for people typically who are not, it's not families, it's people that have been chronically homeless for a year or more. And they are thinking it's probably going to be more single people or couples because they're pretty small houses. But they have built it. It's a replicator. They call it a replicator village off of a village called Community First. I'm going to show a video about this in a little bit, out of Austin, Texas, which started out as a food truck kind of ministry that ended up building and then went into kind of these RV park for homeless people that went into this tiny home village. And they have really spent a lot of time researching best practices and how to be able to help this particular kind of unhoused person. It certainly doesn't deal with all of the kind of unhoused populations that we have, like the working homeless with families, for example. It doesn't deal with that. But we're going to be looking at Providence Park because it's a brand new initiative here in Central Arkansas. I just did a tour of it a couple of weekends ago, and they've broken ground on multiple different parts. And so the stakeholder map I have assigned here to begin the stakeholder map, because it's going to take you a couple of weeks to kind of pull together things. So I'm going to describe this assignment not because you need to get it done by next week, but because you have 2 weeks to get it done and you need to start thinking about it. So for this coming week, you're going to review the websites of both Providence Park to learn more about what they're doing here in Central Arkansas, but also this website from the Community First Village in Austin, Texas, that they're based off of. And then the following week, I do a podcast with my connection with a nonprofit called Braver Angels in Arkansas, and I'm connected nationally as well, but the podcast is for Arkansas. And we recently did an interview with the founder of the Providence Park, as well as their kind of community liaison director. And so these are 30-minute interviews, and it's just something that I want you to also be listening to as part of your reading, and it'll just give you some more ability to fill out the stakeholder map. Okay, so I'm going to describe the assignment to you next, knowing that I'm throwing kind of a lot at you, but I tend to do better if I can see 2 weeks in advance kind of what I'm working on, rather than, oh, by the way, you've got something, especially since this class is on a Thursday night. Oh, you've got something due on Sunday. That seems a little hard. So because I like to work like that, that's how I teach. I know not everybody quite does it that way, but if you look here under assignments, so this is where you find all the assignments for the class, discussions, and the work-based conflict plan, as well as the journal post. So and they've got the due dates for this. So the stakeholder conflict map. So we'll click on this, and again, for these larger assignments that are worth a little bit more points, like 25 points, but more than the discussion post are, you have to open them up as instructions and view the instructions separately. Okay, so I'm just going to read this to you because it's important to go through it and see if there's any questions. Since your, let's see, open this up a little bit bigger. Since your final team project relates to the new Providence Park Village, you will conduct off-site research on their work with the unhoused and how incorporating a trauma-informed lens, I'll define that in a minute, how incorporating a trauma-informed lens can enhance your understanding of conflict management within this context. So start with their website here to get acquainted with their work, and that's the actual Providence Park website, the link out. Now, what I mean by a trauma-informed lens is that we recognize, and in our interview with them, most unhoused people have gone through some kind of trauma. And in situations with the working poor, for example, or working homeless, they're just one crisis away from becoming homeless. I'm reading a book right now called I'll find it because I don't have the physical copy. I'm listening to it actually, called There Is No Place for Us, Working and Homeless in America. It was written in 2025 by Brian Goldstone, and it basically is following multiple families who are from Metro Atlanta. And really, I mean, your heart just kind of goes out as you listen to the stories, because all of them have experienced trauma of some kind. And so without understanding that there are things that, and when I define trauma is any kind of crisis. Trauma could be health, trauma could be violence, a domestic assault, trauma could be loss of a family member, trauma could be an unexpected pregnancy, trauma can be anything that disrupts your everyday life. All of us have experienced trauma, unless you are, your life is kind of has kid gloves around it. We've all experienced trauma. We all probably have some. And so being able to look at the homelessness issue and the unhoused through the lens of a trauma-informed lens just basically means that I am recognizing that I could be there. Anybody can be in where they are if they experience the kind of trauma that they have experienced. So anyway, we'll get in more into trauma-informed lens, but just so you know a little bit about that. So based on your research, you're going to create a stakeholder map. Now, initially, when I was creating this assignment and thinking about this, I was like, okay, so can I give you kind of a template for a stakeholder map? Some of you may never have created one of these. This is kind of something that social workers do, or that sociologists do. And so I'll tell you, I did provide an example of this, so I'll talk about that. To do that, you're going to identify stakeholders that have something to do with Providence Park in particular. Okay, so stakeholders, some of their potential concerns and interests, communication strategies that could be used with those stakeholders for addressing conflict. Because as I was talking to Erin Stanger, who is the founder of and I've met with her a couple, I guess 3 times now. And as I was talking to her about Providence Park, it was very clear that this is not smooth sailing. She has to work through and negotiate different kinds of things depending on who it is she's talking to. And so that is all part of the process of building something new. And so a stakeholder map helps you identify who those kind of folks might be. And you can use similar models, so like Austin, Texas, for example, outside of Central Arkansas in your research if you want. So based on your research, it says use this template. And here's another example, Doc Rice, of some time where I've not allowed you to be able to actually change something. But if you click on here, this template, you notice it says make copy first. And over here, because I've got it the share settings set as anyone with the link as a viewer, you can't make changes on it. Okay, so what you have to do is you actually have to make a copy, go down under file, make a copy, and then you'll name it something, put it wherever you want to put it in your drive. Okay, make a copy, and then it'll be yours that you can actually make changes of. Okay, so after doing some research on Providence Park uses template, so I actually identified who I thought the stakeholders were for Providence Park. You can take things out of this. You can add lines to it if you want, but you don't have to make it difficult. You can just use these stakeholders if you want. You know, what do you think the role and relationship to the organization is, and what might be, and you're just guessing here, what might be their key interest or concerns? What is it that how are they connected? Okay, so we've got founders, donors, partner organizations, volunteers, staff, board, local officials. Missionals are the people who are going to live on site. They're kind of like in a communal living situation, like a college dorm. They would be like the resident assistants. They're like the RAs, okay, if you've ever lived in a college dorm. They actually are living on site. The neighbors are going to be the unhoused people who are living there. That these are permanent homes that they can live in there until they die if they want. I think the rent is like $325 a month, which is, you know, consistent with what they believe that people can pay, especially if they've got some disability income coming in. And a lot of these folks do have some disability income that will be coming in. The community close by, so you've got people in the neighborhood. She was telling us that that they have had actually some crime and theft actually at the site as they have been building, and so they've had to up the sheriff and police protection and looking, you know, kind of driving around. And the neighbors have actually said thank you because we now feel more safe than we did. And you know, a lot of neighbors didn't want this village to be built because they not in my backyard. And so that kind of syndrome. And then there's going to be a bus system stop there. It's actually really close to the Southwest Trail also, and all the neighbors who are going to come are going to get a bicycle. So they're going to have access to that Southwest Trail goes from Central High School all the way to Hot Springs. So anyway, they got a lot of cool things that they've already built into it, but these are the partner stakeholder groups as I was looking at their website that I thought you probably need to deal with. So Tony, I see you have your hand up, so let me stop sharing, then I'll come back to this template here in a minute and answer your question first.
Yeah, I was just wondering, so could you like, I don't know, drop a pin or give us the exact location of where it will be? So if we just kind of want to go and get a look, because, you know,
they
just kind of
are,
seeing it might help us, or might
yeah,
help
and
me
they do have
identify who
tours. So
stakeholders
the
could
best
be.
thing to do is to actually sign up for, and they did give me a pin when I did the tour. So let me just share my screen again. You can't just go out there because it's
Okay.
locked up, or they've tried to do it. So Where about Providence Park, where want to tour the property. Okay, so this is, you would actually just need to email them and they will give you, but it is in Saline County. So it's not, I'm just trying to think, when they sent me a pin for this, let me just find what Mandy sent me. Just so I can tell you kind of so yes, it's in Mableville. Tony, if you know where Mableville is.
Yeah, I think roundabout. So
Yeah, so it's the coordinates, I mean, it's 6900 Green Road, Mableville, Arkansas. But we got lost even with the pen and had to come back and get to it. So I don't know if you can see my.
Not really, but I think I can with that. I should be able to identify it roundabout, even if I have to look at it on a map.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, it's off of Chico Road. I don't know if you know where, anyway.
Not particularly, but I'll
Yeah,
look
I
at a
didn't
map
either.
and then I'll
So,
start referencing myself as to if I've been around that area. I may have, and I just don't recall.
yeah.
I'm kind
So,
of
I mean, this
terrible
is
with
the
names.
land is actually much, they've done more since I've actually been there since this, but, yeah, so that's where it is. So that was your question. So, so let me go back to the template here and just talk through the rest of this so that and I'll answer questions about this next week too, as you kind of get into it. So what I'd like for you to do, then there's a second table. It says categorize each of these stakeholder groups by level of power and interest and add that to table 2. And power and interest, power can be, anything that's in that RICE model that we're going to talk about tonight. So any kind of resources, that resource interactional kind of power. There's lots of different kinds of power. And then interest, do they have a high stake in it? I mean, Erin, she gave up her other job to do this. She's clearly has a high interest and she probably has high power, but not everybody does. So you're going to basically do the same stakeholder groups, then high, low on power interest. And then it says to identify what potential conflicts they might have with the other stakeholders, add that to table 2. One of the things that she talked about was, and I didn't really, I guess partner organizations fits with this. If we look at partnerships, let's see if they've got that under the about. But she said that they have like multiple architecture firms that are, where are the FAQ partnerships? Okay, so they have multiple architecture firms that are working on this, multiple construction people. So, and she's like, the way that they're doing this right now, they could potentially have people, engineering groups. Normally they would maybe just have one to do the whole thing, but it's such a huge thing, and they are looking for volunteers to help. That, I mean, you could see that there might be even differences of opinions about how you do certain things. I mean, they've got some Christian organizations and some non-Christian organizations. And so, when I look at this, I mean, there's a lot of people that are connected to this. I mean, there's another architecture firm. And so when you look at these partners and you're filling this out, you can imagine what kind of potential conflicts might there be between those partner organizations. And so you can make this as long as you want, right? So, you just keep typing and it just keeps making it big, right? So when you make a copy of this, you can just you can see what I'm doing. All right, so you're actually typing into the document once you make a copy of it, okay? And then, what do you think the communication strategy might be? And I identified what some examples of that based on their interest and potential conflicts. And so you were just kind of hypothetical. If you were kind of sitting back and you were an advisor, part of their board or their advisory group for Erin and Mandy, who are kind of overseeing this, you would be developing something like this for them if they'd ask you to. So a lot of people use stakeholder maps to help their advisory board give them advice. And so this is just some experience for you to get to know a little bit about the organization before you get into having to do the final project where you're doing some training, development of training for them. So it might take you a little bit of time. It's not going to be something you can do in 2 hours probably, which is the reason why I'm giving the assignment to you now for you to be thinking about. Okay. Questions about that?
I just have a quick
Right.
question on page.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Tony.
Yeah, go ahead.
I see stakeholder, your goal, and communication strategies. And what exactly is that? Because it looks like something that I can drag and drop, but I think there's something different.
Oh, that's just examples. So
Gotcha,
just
okay.
examples. So a lot of times the communication strategies should be based on what you think the goal is, your goal with those people, right? So for the major donors, you want to continue getting their support and having it continue. So you're going to have to continue showing them that what their money is going for is making a difference. So that's where the impact stories might be a communication strategy. I just put those as examples. So when you're thinking about communication strategies, you really need to think about what your goal is. If you were Aaron and Mandy, okay, so kind of imagine yourself as them when you're filling this out. If you were Aaron again as the founder, Mandy is their community partnership person, kind of overseeing the whole thing. If you were them, how would you what kind of communication strategy would you need with each one of these groups? And you might have to think about your goal for continuing the relationship with each one of those to come up with that strategy. So that's the reason why I've got that goal in there.
All right.
Other
And my
questions?
question,
Tony.
mine was just so in definition of a stakeholder itself, it's anybody with a vested interest in the success of the project, correct?
That is
Just wanted
right.
to make
Or
sure that I'm
vested
reading right.
interest might be they've given $10. So they don't have a very high interest, okay?
But they have
And very low power, but a vested interest of the people that are constructing and giving of their time and building the tiny homes, they have a higher interest and probably higher power, okay? So the more person volunteers, the more they give of their resources, the more they're probably also going to have a higher interest in the success of the village.
okay.
But it doesn't always equal that, right? I mean, I could
Yeah.
be, I could volunteer a lot of time, but not have as much, if it fails, it fails. Like I just, I've got a resume builder, so I don't
Yeah.
have a lot of power, right? But so.
Gotcha. I was just because I saw when you were scrolling through the partners, like I know it's all the Pulaski County Sheriffs, and it's just because of my background, I kind of tend to think of things from that perspective going forward. And so, I highly doubt they'd have a money vested interest, but I imagine he has a political interest because I think the Pulaski County Sheriff is an elected leader. So
Yes,
he
and
wants to see
actually,
it successful so he can use that in his future
and
campaign.
he helped them get the land.
Okay. I
Okay.
probably know.
And the judge as well. There's a
Okay, and the
judge that's
judge.
somewhere in there. And so there has been, I don't know what all their interests are. And I will say that if you want to pick out a couple or three partner organizations rather than just the partner organizations at large, and then take out the line that says partner organizations and put in maybe 2 or 3 specific ones that you might be familiar with or you see from their story.
Yeah.
This is connection. I'm fine with that. So you can change the stakeholder groups. I just put those in as a starting place because I think some people are going to be like, I don't even know where to start. Okay. So
Yeah, that's how I feel.
feel free to make changes on that. Okay. The more for this, the goal of this assignment really is for you to get to know the work. Okay.
Yeah.
And just to be able to be a little bit conversant with it so that when we get into more of the training portion that we're going to do the second half of the semester, you're going to be like, I feel comfortable now a little bit in being conversant with the kind of thing that they do.
Okay. Thank you. That cleared it
Yeah.
up. I
So
appreciate it.
I'm not looking for perfection here. I'm looking for, let's get you some experience making a stakeholder map and getting you to know Providence Park.
That's good. Sounds good.
All right. I think that's all I want to say in terms of the assignments. for the coming 2 weeks. Are we good on those things? So this is kind of the way class is working. As you'll notice, we'll do a check-in, and then we'll do the assignments, and then we'll go into the second half of the class period will be application of concepts. And if you guys are okay with just pushing through and not taking a break, we'll just do it and kind of get that done in the 2-hour time period. We can get done. But if you do need to take a break, then just turn your video off and get a quick drink of water or go to the restroom or get something to eat. You can eat here. I'm fine with that. And then just come back, and we'll know when you come back that you're back. So if you miss something, you can always watch a portion of the video too. So all right, well, let's go into the away from the assignments and into the class notes. I had for another class a student telling me how sometimes Blackboard Ultra, depending on the instructor, can be really confusing. And so that's why I spend a little bit of time showing where things are. I don't assume that people remember necessarily from week to week. So anyway, so under weekly materials, and I literally, because it's the first time I'm teaching this class, I'm staying 1 week ahead of you guys. So week 3, the week 3 note-taking handout. So I'm not even hardly a week ahead because I haven't put week 4 in yet. But the week 3 note-taking handout is what we're going to have pulled up here, and you're going to be able to see it and kind of see what we're covering with this. And we're going to spend some time looking at the TRIP model. We're going to spend some time looking at the RICE model, and then kind of tying it all together with that the balcony perspective. Okay, so that's where we're headed. And you can also use these, because I try to post them by Saturday. My notes, I try to get Saturday morning is when I kind of do my work for getting this class ready for the following week. So you can always use this and download it if you want, and take notes from your readings on it, if that's helpful for you, because I'm going to just try to pull out the things that I see as most important. You may not see exactly the same things. You'll notice that on the weeks that we don't have the discussion post on your work-based plan, I will pull out things that I would like for you to be focused on in the discussion post from the readings. On the weeks that we have the discussion-based plan, then you're going to be pulling out from the readings into your reflections on other people's posts. So that's kind of how we're making the connection to the readings in those discussion posts. So let's talk about this TRIP model. I started out tonight with a story, and the story was I was working with, and I'll give you a little bit more detail just to kind of give some framework on this. I was working in Braver Angels with a couple of other people. We have a meeting with the Chief Operating Officer this coming Monday, and we were doing some preparation and planning for that meeting. And I won't keep this up the whole time so that we can look at each other, but so you can just pull up the notes if you want to. I'll bring them up every once in a while. But we had this meeting where on Labor Day, and one of the people was out of town. And sometimes most people, why you want to have a meeting on Labor Day? It's supposed to be a holiday. But this woman that I was having a meeting with is going to be out of town. And I'm like, she wanted to do some prep work for this meeting. Well, we have the three of us. I kind of am the linchpin between these three people. When I say linchpin in a good way, I'm like the mediator between them. The two other women are a little bit more testy towards each other. So so when I think about that, I'm like, I sometimes will kind of mediate conflicts between them. And I knew that the woman that I met with on Monday had already been upset with the way the agenda for the last COO meeting that we had gone. She felt like that the third party had created the agenda without her. So I thought, well, there's two of us are meeting, let's just create the agenda. Well, the problem was I didn't send the agenda out for the third person to take a look at to approve it. I copied the COO and gave it to at the same time that this third person saw it. She was furious. Okay. And as I was thinking about this, I think she has a right to be furious. Now, what we actually put on the agenda is not controversial, at least not from our perspective. But she didn't have the choice to say no or yes. And we took away a little bit of her power that she had kind of taken on herself to be in control of things. And so there were all kinds of things going on. So as I was thinking about it and I was reading this chapter, I was like, so what kind of goals are happening here? What in the world is going on? And so was she really upset about what we put on the agenda? That would be, if I was going to share my screen again, that would be a topic goal. She really, the content of the agenda. Or was she more concerned about what this was, how she wanted to be treated? Or did she feel like she wasn't being respected and somehow this kind of made her look bad? Or was she upset about the process? Now, when you read chapter 3, and I love the way it does this, it actually has, in each conflict, you can almost draw which one of these is the biggest, and the others are all conflicts most of them have got all 4 of these present, but some of them maybe just a tiny little bit. I don't think she was really upset about the topic, but she was very upset about the process, which had implications. So the biggest circle would probably be process or relationship or identity. She's no longer the person in charge. So I don't know for her which one would be largest. But when I started thinking about this is why she's upset, it really helped me. It was like going to the balcony and being able to see the perspective of, because my first reaction was, how petty. We were just getting the work done ahead of time. But when I went to the balcony to think about, I was reading this chapter, I'm like, oh, this is why she's really upset. And so then I had to think about, how am I going to repair this? And when I did try to repair it, and I said, if you can go ahead and make changes to the agenda. She said, like, no, I'm not going to do that. It was like and that showed me the topic wasn't the clear thing. In fact, I don't even need to be at the meeting, she said, if this is the way things are going to run. Okay. Well, that also told me that process was huge. Okay. And so I'm like, and then she was shutting off and just being really quiet in a meeting. And I'm like, she's just shut down. So she just is like going to pout for this relationship. I mean, it was all of these things. So what I would like for you all to think about, so that it's not just my story and this is application, is I'm going to put you into breakout rooms, okay, into pairs. And I'm going to do this a couple times tonight, I think, if we have time, so that it just makes it a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to manually assign you and hopefully assign you to different people each time, so that you can get to know each other a little bit better. So Kat and Jeff, you're the first ones on my list, and so you're going to be in the first group, and then Doc Rice and Tony are going to be in the second one. Okay. So what I want you to do is, I would like for you to share a conflict that you've experienced. It could be something you've already written about or you've already shared, or it could be something completely different. Okay. So a conflict that you've experienced, and and if you have time, you'll both do this, but I don't know that you will. And I want you to kind of identify what part of the TRIP model, topic, relationship, identity, or process, was most important in shaping the conflict to be what it was. So I'll put this question into the chat. So what part of the TRIP model was, or seemed, I guess, most important in shaping the conflict? Okay. And I'd like for you both to kind of answer that, and just to identify which of those, and just kind of so you can get a little conversant using that TRIP model with your own conflicts. So if you both can share, if you both have time to share, that's fine. If you only have one person to share, that's fine too. So I'm looking, so I think I'm going to give you about 6 minutes for this. so that each person, maybe you'll have time like 3 minutes per, but if you don't have time, but only one person to share, then that's fine too. So you don't have to go into a lot of detail about the conflict. You could just say, I had a conflict over this, my order wasn't right at the restaurant, and this is the blow up that happened. Okay, and then here's the part of the trip model that seemed most important, but I also think these things also were important. Okay, actually, I think I'm going to change this to 8. That way we'll have more time, a little bit more time for you to share. So do you guys understand what I'm asking you to do? All right. So if you have time to share, both of you share, you can. If you wanted to spend time on one conflict, I'm fine with that too. But try to identify, and if you want, try to kind of picture which one of these is the biggest, like it does in the book. You know, which circle would be the biggest, and then which of the other goals are impacting that or feeding in. Okay. All right, I'm going to open the rooms. All right, so for those of you who are online, I'm going to go over the journal entry for this week so that you can see that. And just as a reminder that you need to be doing those. That's my way of being able to kind of maintain a relationship with you and give you some feedback and just to know that you are actually applying things in the class. So while they're in the breakout rooms, that's what I'm going to do here. So under assignments, you go to, again, this is, when you're just going in here, we've got weekly materials, we've got assignments. You go in here to weekly journal post. And then you see here, you should have already posted twice, okay? And you see here, the next one is September the 7th. So, and I'm basically asking similar kinds of questions that I'm covering in class for these journal posts. It's the reason why I don't put a whole lot of them, all through the semester, because I don't know yet what I'm covering for each week until kind of the week before. So it's almost always applying something from the readings. So after watching the class video for week 3, and so I really do want you to watch the class video before you do this. So this is kind of a short timeline. So because I typically post the videos on Friday mornings, and so this is due on Sunday at 11:59. So a lot of things due on Sundays. So after watching the class video, but you can do the readings ahead of time so that you'll be ready. All you have to do is watch the class video. After watching the class video for week 3, reading the readings for week 3 without the use of AI, answer the following questions. And so from the Urey possible text, and there's only a few pages from that, which idea stood out to you the most, why? And then from chapter 3, how might you use the trip model in one of your relationships? And so you could do the same thing that they're doing right now, which is basically you could use it to analyze, one of the conflicts to see which of the models, part of the model actually was most apparent in that particular conflict. And so you could tell a little bit about that conflict and tell how that would help you understand better what's going on. And then chapter 4, what's one principle you'd like to remember for your own relationships? And then what's one question that you have so far about the class based on the class video from this week? And that could be on an assignment. If you don't have any questions, you can actually say, I don't have any questions as well. These aren't worth any points, but they are my way of just kind of checking in and making sure you're pulling something out of the reading to apply to your life, just like I would be having them do as we're working in class. So if you have any questions on that, make sure you let me know, but I don't want to do that. Just exit out of this particular assignment. So, all right, I will stop sharing and I'm going to stop recording, pause the recording so you don't just have blank space here. Okay, I hope that gave you a little bit of application of the trip model, but let me just kind of do a kind of a whole class just debrief of that. What were some of the trip goals that were the big bubbles that came out? Let's just kind of go around. Tony, what was the biggest for your conflict?
Well, so we focused on Dr. Rice's, and his was I view the identity within his because he used that conflict from earlier, the
Mhm.
one where this individual just completely violated his space and his self-image with his students. He didn't know who he was and what was going on, and then to blast the student out for a minor violation that they were just ignorant of the rules was completely out of order. And but I think Dr. Rice focused on the relationship goals and the process areas where that interaction was wrong on multiple levels,
Yeah.
similar to how yours was. And it
Yeah,
was
so
very
you see,
informative. He's a very good teacher who looks out for his students.
compliments to you, Doc Rice, on that. All right, so anything else you want to add, Doc Rice, on that situation in terms of those goals?
Well, I appreciate how Tony really broke that down because he allowed me to see some different things as it relates to identity. For me, it was more about that relationship, but also more about respect. And also for me, in terms of conflict, because I was caught off guard, and I think that's what happens to me a lot. That I'm caught off guard. I would really respond one way, but if I had been prepared to respond that way, I would have. And so, for me, I just think that I learned, and I mentioned to him that I still don't know who the person is, but I heard the guy's voice this afternoon, and we bumped into each other, and so I know I can recognize him now. But that's all I want to add is that I think for me the trip model was about recognizing what that conflict was and that identity that was the bigger issue for me.
Okay, okay. Good to that. I mean, I think I agree with you, Tony, that seems like the biggest bubble to me. Although that may not have been initially what needed to be dealt with. The relationship and the process might have been what needed to be dealt with initially, but underneath it all is really identity for both the student, but also for Doc Rice and his class. So, all right, Kat and Jeff, did you share more than one or just one?
We went with Jeff's because Jeff has such good conflicts to share, especially him being in the workplace, and it was easy to work together to identify like the type of goals from the trip model with.
Okay, so what was the overarching big goal?
I think Jeff and I identified for him it was identity, but for his supervisor's goal was content related. So they
Oh,
had
topic.
So they had, he explained how he needed some promotional flyers, and the print shop is behind. I'll make it short on a lot of stuff. And he went to a supervisor to say, "Hey, we got the school I got to go to. It's we're trying to make this partnership. This is before they go out and they do things. I'm talking to these seniors. I need to give them promotional information to walk away with." So with Jeff, it was about, hey, I need this, saving face. Like, this is identity right here. This is my whole job. Like, I go out and talk to these people. And his supervisor was just kind of like, well, he wasn't thinking identity. He was thinking content. And Jeff is like, I'm a speaker. I speak to people. So identity was big for him, but for his supervisor, it was content.
Yeah, Jeff, you want to add anything to that? That's interesting that you noticed that there were differing goals, and I'll talk a minute about that. But anything you
Yeah,
want to
and in case they do watch this, in their defense, okay, technically it was out of their hands, okay? Print shops tied up. I mean, we ordered 10,000 view books, okay? So the print shop ran out of paper already, okay? We're
Oh,
already on, and we're not even halfway through that order. So, but one thing that as we were talking about the identity parts, um, Kat had called out the inner cogs of it in a sense of you may have that one root conflict and then it spirals out to another one where we were discussing, well, if I don't have good relations with the school and I don't look, professional, I don't have the materials that I need, maybe I can't get into that school as often, right? Maybe that means I get less exposure into that school. Then if I don't have as many students, interested in applying, or maybe I can't get that interest, then the upper administration might start asking, hey, you used to have 20 students every year, interested. Now no one's interested. What's going on, in that sense? So one conflict kind of spiraling to another one, where is that root cause? And then it started making me think about how much more psychological you kind of have to go with trying to figure out, especially in the identity side of things, trying to save face and thinking about perceptions. How deep does that rabbit hole go for the psychological purpose of where did those perceptions change in the first place?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting, in the chapter, the authors talk about that the two that are hidden a lot, that people don't think about when we're in conflict are the identity and the relationship ones. People recognize the content, they recognize process, right? But underneath are these two that if you don't deal with them, they actually can lead to escalation. Now, you talked about it kind of spiraling down and impacting your job eventually, right? I mean, and your performance review. But it is really about also this whole notion of if I don't recognize these in myself or the other person, then even if we come up with a solution, we may end up not having a solution that works for us. So I'm building in, I think I may have mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but I'm building in, starting this semester, building in mid-year reviews with my employees. So these are faculty that you might actually have in classes, right? We normally have these once a year required annual reviews, right? We're looking at their teaching, research and service and their goal setting. And so kind of what Ben was talking about in his post, if anybody listened to that from this last week. And so one of the things that I recognize is that is so touching. That's just content. And there are oftentimes things that are going on in the department that are relationship and identity things that we don't talk about. And yet they're underneath the surface. So when I ended up bringing in a facilitator to work with my department on an ongoing conflict that we were having about who was going to teach summer school, she said, April, in thinking about this, she did an anonymous survey, and she said, in thinking about this, I have identified that there are some underlying issues that you guys have never talked about. Now, she didn't call it trip goals, but it really was at some level. And so I think it's really important that to remember that regardless of, where we're thinking about, all four goals are often present. And they may not be obvious to you, and they may not be in the same order of importance to you as they are for the other person. So sometimes we can actually even have, and it talks about it in one of the places in one of these chapters, meta communication. We can actually have communication about our communication. And so sometimes you can actually stop and say, I mean, my daughter and I were having a conflict last night about, how much money are we going to help support with the purchase of this new car? And I finally realized part of what she was we were on different levels of goals. I was totally about the topic. And she thought she was coming against every single thing I was saying. And when I think about it now, I'm like, it's because she believed that what I was saying said something about her and what I believed about her identity, and also said something about the relationship. And she didn't think the process was fair. So I'm like, I was just all in content. And so if we don't allow the other person or get to the point where we're at the balcony view and are able to see there may be other things going on here than just the presenting problem, then we're not going to necessarily be able to come to some kind of satisfactory conflict management strategy that works for that relationship. So anyway, I found this chapter to be really enlightening for me. So I hope that the rest of you all are excited about it like I was. Okay, we're going to move to the next chapter. Actually, is that chapter 3? I don't remember. Which chapter is, okay, so power is chapter 4. I put in the handout the wrong chapter. So power is chapter 4, right? I like power stuff, but I was like, yeah, that one just didn't quite speak to me as much. But I did like its emphasis on this kind of relational theory of power that, and on page 117 from the newer version of the book, it says power, and I'll pull this up on the handout so you can see it and the online people can see it. So power is a property of the social relationship rather than the quality of the individual. I think for many years I thought about leadership and the power as being only position. The person in the position who can fire and hire and give raises. Those are the people who have the power. But as I was reading this chapter, I realized it's so much more about that. And it really could be co-created, as they were talking about, in our relationships between people. Well, when they talk about this, they talk about it in terms of, they like acronyms. So RICE, right? Resource control, interpersonal linkages, communication skills, and expertise. So let's just kind of go through each one of those. As I go through each one of them, I want you to think about which one of these do you think that we typically underestimate. We just do not value. We underestimate the value of it. So the first one is who controls the money, time, space, and material resources. I think about Providence Park. Okay, so right now they are so dependent, and their stakeholders are so dependent on people giving of money and time and material resources. Those people have a lot of power. If all those resources were taken away and those partnerships, they wouldn't be able to do this. So they have a lot of power. And I think a lot of that resource control, I think about right now we're in the process of the whole, and Doc Rice will know this too, the Arkansas Department of Higher Education is working on creating a new core based on the legislature's desire that there's what they call a 15-hour requisite core. This is for undergraduates, okay? And we just, all of us who are kind of in the trenches of teaching do not know what they're going to say. Most universities right now have a 35-hour core of general education, but we used to have a 40-hour core until the last time ADHE changed the core for the whole state, which was like in 2013, 14, Dr. Rice, I think. And then a whole bunch of the universities brought their general education down from like 40, 42, 44 down to 35. So we had to follow suit. Well, now we don't know. Is it going to be down to 15? Is it going to be 35? Is it going to be 38? And I feel like a faculty member, I have no power in this. I just feel like there's absolutely, I mean, what power do I have to even be able to negotiate, right? So when I was reading this chapter, that's what I was thinking about is, do I have any power? And I actually do. I talked to the faculty senate chair yesterday, and I have power as a chair and director, and but less power than if I was in the provost office, who is summarizing all of the survey information and sending it up to ADHE that they collected. Because I'm like, well, what if he doesn't take the comments that I made, and he just ignores those? So he has the power, Anyway, so resource control, the money, the time, the space, the material resources, they have a lot of power right now. ADHE does, okay, in terms of that. Just as much as in Providence Park, you've got all these partners who are giving the money, time, and space. All right, but power is also about interpersonal power. You probably have been, and I'm imagining Kat, I'm thinking about in the military, you probably, and even in school systems and other kinds of things, there are people in your offices or people in your place that because they have relationships with those people, they have power. So I was laughing with one of my colleagues today who she can get almost anything she wants from one of the deans. And I'm like, how did you get that relationship with that person? I'm like, I've sent that person an email and they don't respond. Okay, this is not my immediate dean. So if you think it is, Jeff, don't worry about it. It's not, I'm not speaking against that person. Okay, but it's another person on campus. And I'm like, how did you get that person to respond to you? That person didn't respond to my emails. I've sent 2 now. And they got exactly what they were advocating for me. So I was happy because they got what I needed from that person. Oh, I just happened to be at Popsicles with the Provost and I saw them. And I'm like, oh, I didn't show up to that rainy day Popsicles with the Provost thing. So, but they did, and they hung out there, right? So, and this particular person, she knows, she's on the ground game. She knows when something's coming before a lot of people do. And I'm like, who are you talking to? Okay, she's got interpersonal linkages. She's connected and she's got power because of that. Not because of position, but just because she is. She's got power. So I kind of like being connected to her and being a friend so that I can kind of feel like I have a little tiny bit of power by knowing things ahead of time. Okay, then I've got this kind of power. Who's got persuasive, relational, and conflict skills? I feel like I've got that, right? It's like not great at it all the time, but I do have advocacy. I mean, ended the conversation yesterday with the faculty senate chair, and I'm like, how can I be of assistance to you in this process? I'm like, that was a strategic, somewhat, but also a nice kind of thing to do. I was thanking her for the work that she has done. I mean, the kind of things that you do to kind of build other people up. I wasn't just doing it though because it was chess play. I was doing it because I was sincerely wanting to be a good colleague. Okay. But I did have some other goals as well. Okay. So I might have some power in communication. And then we've got people that sometimes are just called in because they have expertise, right? They have special skills that are valued in that particular situation. So they're going to be called on. So you notice there that none of this model is based on who's in the position of power. The one that's closest to that is the resource control, right? That part of it. It's the person that might be able to control the power, in terms of position because of money, time, and space. But in your workplaces, in the places where you are connected and having to negotiate, even in my volunteer organization, there are people who have power that aren't even on staff. I have power in this meeting with this group of people that I have that I probably didn't handle the process well. I have power because I served for 2 years with the COO before she became COO, and we are really close friends. Okay, so I have power that the rest of the people in that group do not have. And so recognizing the power that we've got and kind of the pull of that gives us leverage, right? And when we have power, one of the things that I really like about the chapter, and I think it was Kat that brought this up at the very beginning, is that we can shift the dynamics. If we have power, by giving power to other people, by inviting them in, as a chair of a department, I have the power to shut people down or to invite them into dialogue. Doc Rice, as a school, the board or city council, or whatever it is that you serve on as the chair, you have power to do that. Now, that person that came in and shouted at you might have had some power too, but not as much power as you have. Okay. So I think about what do we do with this? So which of these, I'm going to stop sharing here. I just want you to put in the chat, which of those 4 do you think in your own experience, let's just think about military. Okay. So Kat, in the military, which of those 4 are overlooked of those 4 kinds of power in the Rice model? You don't have to put it in the chat, but just tell us out loud. You're muted.
Okay, I was trying to click on the face thing so I can become unmuted, but it wasn't doing it. So I was gonna say the one that's, I mean, it's recognized, but it's not as recognized as the other 3 are, is interpersonal linkages. A lot of times, resource control is obvious because it's a hierarchy in the military. Communication skills, obviously, because you're always getting someone trying to convince you to do something for them. And then expertise, because there's technical things you always call the certain positions in the military, the warrant officers and the enlisted folks when you need something. But a lot of people don't concentrate on the interpersonal linkage. They try to do things by themselves, and the interpersonal linkage is very important when you need to be connected. I
Yeah.
think of it more like networking.
Yeah, it's who you know. Who you
Yeah.
know may be more important, and
Yeah,
how you have relationships with those people.
right. Well, so like, and I say that because my goal.
Uh-oh. I think she may have pushed the get off button. So yeah,
There she is.
there you
Internet
go.
problem.
Yeah.
So I was going to say, sorry about that. My goal, I have DSL. So my
That's
goal
okay.
was always to know the experts and those people that could get things done. I was an officer, and typically they tell officers to stay with officers, and I was like, well, you guys aren't technical experts. No problem. I need to know the people that if I need to network, they can get something done.
Mhm.
So a lot of people don't concentrate in the military on that interpersonal linkage.
Yeah. And that's so important to do. And at the university, although it's a different kind of hierarchy, also very important. Jeff, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so when Kat had said officers stay with officers, that instantly brought me back to the Monica Guzman book about the sorting, the othering, and the siloing. So in that book, they talk about essentially you're sorting out people who are more like you, then you're saying, okay, well, these are my people who think like me, these are the other people. Then eventually you get so engrossed that you start listening to the people who are like you and saying, oh, this is us. We're going to stay closed off from those other people. So there's like no bridge, there's no communication in that gap. So when you mentioned officers stay with officers, I was like, clearly, there's no organizational listening, there's no conversations happening between different rankings. So there's got to be a lot of that conflict.
Yeah. You can see this also in unionized organizations. And I know Arkansas is a right to work state, but in Iowa, which has a lot of unions, where I was before, we had the university was unionized, and John Deere, which was one of the biggest employers, was unionized, and so you'd often have strikes and stuff. But there is a clear, even you think about the us versus them, a really clear us versus them. So as soon as a person in the academic side of the house would become a school or a department director, then they became part of the hierarchy that was not good. So you had the faculty and you had those people. Okay. And so, that kind of feeling and thought, but to be able to work across those lines, and sometimes even you'll see it in academics, and Doc Rice, you've probably seen this, between student affairs and academic affairs. Okay. So where you've got, or between the people who are doing sports at a high school versus the people who are doing the academics, which one's more important? It's like we're going to hang with each other, and yet getting to know, especially if your students are connected in with their student athletes, it's really important that you're connecting in with those coaches, and it's not this us versus them. So those interpersonal linkages are really important. All right, well, I'm gonna put you into pairs again, and this time I'm gonna give you an exercise that's gonna be not related to your own. And I forgot last time I said I was putting something into the chat so that it'd go with you to the room, but it didn't, because I didn't click the chat. All right, so let me find the scenario and what I want you to do with it, because I had to type this out on another document. All right, so this is a short scenario. I'm going to read it aloud, but also put it into the chat, that I would like for you to work through in the your group. So a project team at your work or at work is under pressure to meet a deadline. One team member, Jordan, feels the manager, Casey, is micromanaging and not trusting them. Casey feels Jordan is avoiding responsibility and slowing progress. The tension erupts in a heated exchange during a Zoom call. All right, so before we go into the breakouts, I want you to think about both in terms of the TRIP model and the RICE goals here. I mean, the TRIP goals and the RICE power here. I want you to think about if Jordan went to the balcony, what might they look at? Let's think about power here. What might Jordan look at in terms of the RICE model? Who has the power here from Jordan's perspective if Jordan was looking at this? What do you think? Jordan's the team member.
Well, I mean, whoever has the power, and that's going to be because she's the team member. It's definitely going to be Casey,
Okay.
because the authority figure is always kind of granted more power because of their title.
Okay, so that's resource control portion of the power.
Yes, and she also probably controls process
Okay.
and identity, probably to a point. The one she probably doesn't have. I mean, maybe a little bit of relationship too, but normally in those, I would think it'd be Casey who has the most power. Jordan might, depending on her interactions with the other team members, if she can rally the team, then she's got power.
Okay. Okay. So that's the thing that you could think about with Jordan. Is there any other power that I've got? If Casey's controlling all the process and she's basically micromanaging, not trusting, where else could I have power to make changes in this? If you've ever been in a situation where you feel like you're powerless, but yet you figure out a way to actually call for change, that's where you have to rely on the other kinds of power. You don't have the resource control, okay? But what other kinds of power do you have? Are there interpersonal linkages? Are there communication skills that you can use to actually, appeal and call for action and negotiate? Are there, other people that you can go to that have expertise and knowledge and skills in those areas? And so that would be something that a person who is kind of in a low power position could potentially, work on and do. All right. So what about if we're looking at Casey? Casey's the manager. If she was going to try to look at this from the balcony perspective and see other kinds of things that might be going on, what kinds of things might she be looking at?
I think she's looking at the deadline. I think she feels pressure for that, and um, I guess getting frustrated when things are not moving as fast as she, as fast as she would like it. Um, and yeah, that's what I see in that example. Kind of the overarching that I have
So she's
responsibility.
experiencing, and she might be experiencing some pressure from above.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
and that's something that also that you don't sometimes see. She may have been told you guys are continuing to miss some deadlines, and so she's just pushing this down.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so one of the things to think about when we're thinking about this, and the topic relationship identity, I'm going to ask you to answer 3 questions in your breakout rooms, okay? And you're going to look at this. You're going to look at kind of the balance of power. How might either party rebalance power in constructive ways? And then you're going to also look at some TRIP goals, okay? So for rebalancing power, if I'm a person in a power position, I have some choices to actually rebalance and actually make the power imbalance not be as bad. So Maybe I ask them for their opinion. Maybe I help them, ask them to help me brainstorm. Maybe I say, I've noticed this and I could use your help on something. I remember having a situation where, okay, so one of my faculty members, and you guys may have Dr. Miracle for a class sometime. So Dr. Miracle used to be my boss, okay? And now I'm his boss, okay? So anytime you've got changes in that, it can create some interesting kinds of dynamics, and it has for our relationship. But I remember once that I thought, you know, I need to kind of, there's some imbalance of power here. I need to ask him, because I was having an issue with my dean, and this was a former dean. And I was like, I need to ask him, based on the fact that he used to be dean, what would he potentially do in that situation? All of a sudden, I'm asking, he's in a lower position of power in terms of resource control, but he's been in a larger other position. I am trying to balance the power out. I didn't think about it at the time as being that. I was just thinking I could use his help. Okay, about how would he like it, what suggestions would he give based on his experience as a dean for me to be able to negotiate. So I was using his expertise, right? So also expertise power, but I didn't think about it in terms of power. So we naturally kinds of do these things. Or I could have just been authoritarian, just push it through how I think I should do it. Okay, but that doesn't typically work well for me, because if I think what I'm doing is good, other people don't think it's so good. All right. But if I'm in a position that's not a position of power, like I feel like I am with this core, what are some things? And then I've had to think about, what can I do to kind of build up my power dynamics on these other areas? And so those are just things that we can, you know, the balance of power we just need to think about. So that's what I mean by that balanced power question. So Doc Rice.
Just a quick question based on your story, and I argue with friends all the time about being in leadership, and they always telling me about what I should be doing and how I should be exerting power and doing things. But my response is that I understand people, and you know, just being in a position of authority doesn't is not going to make anybody do anything. You know, I think maybe 50 years ago that might have been the model, but now you have to be more collaborative in your approach, even in leadership, because people are so you know, they're so triggered by you know, someone trying to micromanage them or someone trying to exert power of them to get them to do things that they might not want to do, you know. So I just want to add that based on your story. Thank you.
Yeah, and I agree. It is a generational thing. I mean, you know, and people who actually study leadership have, you know, they talk about kind of different styles of leadership. And it used to be, you know, authoritarian. Then it was like democratic, and then they became, you know, came up with these models of servant leadership, and then they came up with models of transformational leadership. And so all these models have recognized we can do things differently than we have seen and had modeled for us. Okay, so I put you into different groups. This time I'm only give you 6 minutes because we're getting close on time here. So Jeff and Doc Rice are together, and then Kat and Tony. Those are different groups than you had a while ago, right? Just make sure. So we give you six minutes. You've got the scenario. I want you to think about how might either party rebalance the power in constructive ways. If you were coaching them from the balcony, what would be one piece of advice you give them? If you need to identify the trip goals as part of that, then you can also answer that question as well. So are you guys good? All right, I'm gonna open up the rooms. All right, so for those of you who are online, again, the scenario that they are working through, I'll read it out loud since you can't see the actual chat. Bring it back up here. A project team at work is under pressure to meet a deadline. One team member, Jordan, feels the manager, Casey, is micromanaging and not trusting them. But Casey feels Jordan is avoiding responsibility and slowing progress. The tension erupts in a heated exchange during a Zoom call. Okay. And it doesn't say in the scenario, so you can imagine it could be a Zoom call where the whole team's present, or it could be a Zoom call just between the two of them. So, because that obviously would change the dynamics if there were more people present. The fact that it's over Zoom also could change the dynamics of what's happening there as opposed to a face-to-face. And and how people are listening in that kind of setting. So the three questions that I asked them to be thinking about was the balance of power. How might either party rebalance power in constructive ways? If you haven't read chapter 4 yet, it really goes into several pages in the interpersonal conflict book on how to rebalance power if you're low in power or if you're high in power. So that's what I'm really trying to get them to look at there. And then the second question is a balcony lens. So kind of from the possible book. If you were coaching either Jordan or Casey from the balcony, seeing it from a larger perspective, what piece of advice would you give them? And then in doing that, you might need to identify, which is the third thing, the trip goals. What topic, relationship, identity, and process goals do you see for Jordan? And also, do you see for Casey? And could there be an actual mismatch between the goals? And could that be a possible reason for why they're having conflict? So that is what I'm asking them to do. So while we're waiting for them to finish, I'm going to pause the recording and then we'll turn it back on when they come back. Okay, I know that was short, but trying to tie us up here. So let's just kind of quickly go through the three questions and just get a few answers here. So what ideas did you have about rebalancing power?
Kat and I discussed on my point of it. Casey, being the manager, she has the power to relinquish some of her micromanaging if she is in fact doing that, and say to them, "Hey, okay, I'm going to trust you. This is the task. This is when I need it done by. I'm trusting you. Go." And maybe maneuver things around so she can cover herself if they fail, but relinquish that power. And then Kat was on the other side of the dynamic to open communication and see if there's an actual solution there.
Yeah.
For Jordan, kind of on the way up.
So to basically share what it is that she's noticing and frustrations. It's hard when you don't have much power to do that. I had a student this week that was talking to me about another professor, and she's like, "I'm really struggling with this class," and she's like, "But I don't want my grade to suffer. I really would like to talk to the professor. Can you talk to him for me?" And I'm like, "I can, but it's best actually if you," so we talked about ways of her communicating about that to that professor. And I did end up following up with the professor after I found out that she had done that. But she needed to actually, she had to open up the communication channels. So good. So I'll ask the other group, Jeff and Doc Rice, what trip goals did you see for either one of them?
Yeah, so really interesting. We were talking about the overarching conflict would have probably been the perceptions of the scarcity of power between the two. So, we're assuming who actually has the power, whether that's title or who has the influence, right? Casey is probably thinking, well, I have this power. Everyone's doing what I'm saying, but you're not doing what I'm saying. So what amount of power do I actually have? And then that's that kind of fear of unknowing, right? And then we talked about, well, from Jordan's perspective, he might be thinking, how much power do you have? When I thought this is more of a collaborative effort, I thought we were doing this as a team instead of, someone holding the power of the group, in that sense.
So
So
really, it's back to identity goals again, that we talked about as being kind of a hidden goal, but both of them wondering, do I really have the power or not? Am I really being respected? Kind of in that questioning of underneath, you might never bring that up because it's like, oh, that looks like I'm kind of like, oh, having self-esteem issues or something. But yeah, interesting. Okay, so what kind of anybody here, what kind of advice would you give Jordan or Casey?
if you don't mind me stepping back in. So Dr. Rice and I were talking about them coming together and just having a general conversation, right? Because that's where it all starts. And then I had mentioned about this book, fantastic. I love this book. Okay. Never Split the Difference. Highly recommend it. Okay. But it's about negotiation. And one of the key points was the open-ended questions you ask. So if Casey would have said, well, I need this report, we need this report done by the end of the day, and then there's only 2 hours left, Jordan might say, by the end of the day? So that kind of gets Casey to think like, well, maybe I don't need it right now by the end of the day. Maybe we can work on something and think about the other person's perspective by asking that. And then mentioning that Uri in the Possible book talked about one specific question is stuck out to me. All psychologists ask it, how does that make you feel? Well, you know, I know we have to have this report by the end of the day, but how do you feel about doing it yourself? Then you can get them to open up a little bit and like, well, it's kind of stressful. Or they could say, I don't mind doing it by myself. I just didn't like the way that you said how to do it. So having those open-ended questions, and strategically wording them to get the answers you're looking for.
The name of that book is Never Split the Difference. I'll have to look it up. So
Yes, and the author was originally an FBI agent who did hostage situations, so very high stakes stuff. And then he applied a lot of what he talked about with everyday things from car sales to asking for raises, and then he became a professor himself. So then he talked about his students' experiences learning from him and practicing what he taught about, but it was really deeply rooted in Getting to Yes by Uri and
yeah,
Fisher.
yeah. So similar kind of principles there. Well, we're going to end here with the last part of the handout, just real quickly, which is from that Uri book. And it talks about, I have some quotes here, perhaps the greatest power we have in difficult situations is the power to choose not to react, but to go to the balcony instead. And so, although he talks about power differently than the Rice model, that's another place we can regain power, is to actually see perspective. I was talking about on the path to possible, the work within, the work with ourselves precedes the work between, the work with others. And so the balcony powers are the power to pause, to stop and reflect before we're acting, the power to zoom in on your interest and your needs. And I added there the trip goals for yourself, right? And the power to zoom out on the big picture and others' interest and needs, their trip goals, but you could also look at their potential power that they've got. And then I just put this statement here at the end to kind of tie this all together with all of these, the 2 chapters we've read and the little pages that you were to read from the Possible book for this week. The Barry Hawker and Wilmot, they give us tools to analyze what's at stake, the trip, topic, relationship. No, I'm blocking on what the I is. What is the I? You guys remember? Identity.
Interpersonal linkage,
Identity. Yeah. So topic, relationship, identity, and
the
process.
other one.
Yeah, and other I for Rice is that. And then where does influence lie? The Rice model. They remind us that power is relational and can be balanced, can work it out between us. And then Uri invites us to take the balcony view, to stop back, integrate those insights, and then re-enter the conflict with more creativity and choice. So I hope that this week the readings have really, that you're going to be getting into, if you haven't finished reading chapter 3 and 4, that you'll really be thinking about that and applying them then in the discussion post for this week. So any questions at this point?
No questions. I just want to say I really like the Rice model because I'm a Rice, and I'm
I
sure.
thought about that when that was like Rice. Okay, so you're gonna think I've got the power resource. I've got the interpersonal linkages, I've got the
Yeah.
communication,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
I've got the expertise. All of those just make up who
right.
I am as Doc Rice.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank
Yeah, and that's actually probably true of you in lots of situations. You've got all four of those kinds of power, and we all do actually
you.
in many
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So, all right, well, I will, that is your brand, Kat said in the chat, Doc Rice. I'll stay on here for a few minutes in case there are individual questions that people want to ask that you want to bring up, just like you would at the end of class if we were face to face. So feel free to stay on if you'd like to do that. Otherwise, we will see you next Thursday. Feel free to email me during the week or in between classes if you have questions. All right. Take care.
Y'all have a good night.
All right, nobody stayed on, so I'm gonna call it a good. So for those of you who are online, feel free to ask questions as well, or let me know what's going on for you in the journals. All right, take care.